Hello and welcome to the Andrew Ferris Podcast. Thanks so much for listening, for watching another episode of the show, solo episode today, where I'm going to talk about creative development on meta ads, but really not so much tactics, messaging strategy, as operations and process building. Something I've been thinking about a whole bunch as I work with clients, because what I believe is that people make this distinction between quality and quantity as approaches to Facebook ads. And what I'm essentially going to argue in this episode is that you want both for different purposes, and that by setting up a good operational process to develop lots of both, you are best positioned for maximum success at one of the highest leverage possible things you can do in your business. Let's jump into it. All right, I teased it in the intro. You got the basic idea probably right away. There's a lot of conversation around quality versus quantity in meta ads. Everybody kind of understands at this point that creative is the difference maker in performance, right? Everybody gets this. The media buying tactics, they matter a lot. In fact, in some ways, I think media buying matters more now than ever, as the tools have changed quite a bit in the, at least for me in the 9 years or so that I've been working in e-commerce and in some way or another being connected to media buying. But no matter what the tools, I'm watching this happen with clients of mine right now. While I think different approaches to media buying, a cost controls driven media approach has really helped me sort of squeeze the most value possible out of some of the creative in the account, the real thing that is a game changer, needle mover in the account is ultimately going to be creative. And so that means that there is this question, which is like, how do you go about developing great meta ads creative? Now, one way to answer that question is to think about what does the creative look and feel like and sound like, and what's the messaging and all those things, right? All of the things in the sort of content element of the creative. But I actually want to step out of the content conversation for a minute and just assume that there is such a thing as good quality creative, okay? And that some creative works better than others, that there is a method to the madness. Maybe a good episode to listen to get some sense of this would be my interview with Jess Bachman, who talked about using data to develop that. I'll put that in the show notes for this episode. Another episode that you could reference here would be, I've done a couple of other episodes I'll put in the show notes about messaging itself and about my approach to messaging. So those episodes may help you, but I think that beyond those episodes and beyond those kinds of thinking about creative itself and the messaging itself, there is a sort of further out view that is really important. And that view is, how do you actually build process around executing creative? Now, to frame this up, I want to make a distinction here between quality and quantity. Because again, like I said, I think there is such a thing as better quality creative that you can develop over time and be effective. And some people actually kind of argue against this point, that there's no demonstrable skill. Nobody seems to be able to predict what creative will work versus what will not. I think that's wrong. I think there's clearly a demonstrable skill of generating better quality creative, and that matters. But the people who argue that sort of thing, usually, and I don't want to get into that argument right now, just at least go with me for a second here. Assume I'm right about that. Think instead about what people who are saying that are usually saying connected to that. What they're usually saying is quantity is what matters more than quality. Quantity matters more than quality because almost nobody can predict what will actually work. And this is a point that I basically do agree with, that while I think there is a demonstrable skill of developing better quality creative over more time, at the same time, to some degree at least, people are very bad at predicting what will work and what will not work. And, I watch this all the time. Every time I've ever seen sort of like ad quality breakdown type content, where it's like people analyzing somebody else's ad and saying, is this ad good or is this bad? And it's like ostensibly experts saying, oh, we know what good creative is. We'll tell you, is this a good piece of creative or not? But they don't have a view to the actual metrics. Like, I just have zero trust in their ability to tell me if the creative is good or not, because they don't know. And lots of creative that doesn't seem like it's going to performs really well. So, but lots of people who are thinking about this question of quality versus quantity, what they're arguing in part is, don't try to predict what creative will perform best. Instead, just develop lots and lots and lots of creative and launch all of it. And at least when it's articulated well, like the guys from Kinship or, Taylor Holiday, CTC, they're going to compare that with something that I also strongly agree with, which is a cost controls driven media buying strategy, where you just let Meta allocate ad spend to the best performing creative. And you don't really worry too much about trying to optimize yourself and those kinds of things. So that's all good. But my question now goes from there to, what does that actually mean for your business? Let's assume there's a grain of truth in all of those different things. Let's say quality creative matters, but also quantity matters at the same time. And we're going to run all this through cost controls. How do I develop both? Because here's what I have come to believe. What I've come to believe really is that certain pieces of high quality creative developed with intentionality do often outperform the rest of an ad account. But you don't know for how long. You don't know how much you can spend on it. You don't know when a piece of creative will sort of die out over time because people have seen it too many times or whatever. That is a real thing. Ad fatigue is a real thing. At some point, creative stops performing as well. And secondly, sometimes creative that you don't think is going to perform does perform really well. And so the quantity thing matters there as well, especially if you can pair quantity with low cost in development of assets. And if you combine up those two things, and then you make one other point, which is that quantity can also be sort of defense. And what I mean here is, let's say your ad account often gets pushed forward by a piece of creative or two that really take off, that meaningfully move the account forward, right? And again, this is something I've seen a lot. A couple pieces of creative are your best quality creative, and they are the thing that double or triple your spend or whatever. And they have this outsized effect. A few pieces of creative win over everything else. Well, let's say those things die out. Then what happens? Well, if you have relied totally on those one or two or three pieces of creative that are outperforming everything else in the account, and you sort of get lazy behind that because those are going really well, you don't keep your foot on the gas in terms of development of creative output and all those things. What can happen is that while those eat up all the spend in the account for a while, eventually they die out. And now you're stuck with all of your second and third tier creative. And it is hard to constantly output sort of banger creative pieces that just work really, really well. And therefore, part of the way you play defense is with quantity behind and underneath that, so that as your top performing creative starts to fade out in its performance, other creative comes in sort of behind it. And that other creative performs really well, or performs at least decently, and therefore makes it so that when your performance steps back, it doesn't step back quite so far. So if you think about those three buckets, right? It's like quality creative might push you massively forward. Quantity creative may sometimes produce winners that you do not expect to be massive winners. And I've seen this plenty of times where just like, maybe if your quality creative has a 30% hit rate or a 40% hit rate to have really big impact, maybe your quantity creative has a 5% hit rate. So you have to develop more of it, or a 3% hit rate, but they can still hit really, really big, right? And then that third piece, quantity creative, can be defense, okay? And if you put all that together, what I actually want to do is then generate creative across all of those buckets regularly. And that is fundamentally, and this is something that people really miss, that is fundamentally an operational problem, okay? It is fundamentally an operational problem. How do you build an operational machine that outputs that kind of creative? You have to produce the assets, edit the assets, get them into the ad account. You have to be doing them across all kinds of different formats and styles and creative ideas and all those things all the time. How do you do that? How do you create that machine that actually runs itself? And I'm going to break down a little bit of how I'm thinking about this problem for brands, okay? So I'm going to give you a few buckets of creative that I think can work really well. So the first is still images that are designed, okay? Still images that are designed. And what I mean there is like sort of your classic thing where you take like a beautiful studio photo and you put copy on it, like almost like an old display ad, right? Where it's like a combination of those things of beautiful photography, simple headline, maybe there's a GIF, maybe there's some simple motion or whatever, but that kind of simple idea. You're not telling a whole story. You're not developing a whole long narrative. It's just headline, maybe a little bit of call outs on the image, etc. Go from there, okay? That's bucket number one. I think the best way to do that is probably to have an agency or a growth partner or a designer or whatever whose job it is to develop those and just constantly be putting those in the account all the time. Somebody has a task, repeating tasks. This is a great place to be thinking about hiring overseas for designers who can do a great job, supplying them with some headlines and giving them options and having them go. Output volume, output options, and have somebody whose job it is to do that. You can do that pretty cheap. Okay? Secondly, still images where there's copy in the context of the photo. And what I mean here is like, this is like the Post-it note example, okay? So the Post-it note ad, you've probably seen these around where people are shooting with their phone and they have copy from the ad instead of being overlaid, designed, superimposed on an image that is like beautifully designed. They're putting the copy into the image itself and they're doing something. This is sort of the very hot, ugly ads idea a little bit where you're taking something that feels native socially and trying to sort of grab attention by doing this differently. I've got an ad that is using a letterboard to do this for one of my clients right now that's performed really well overall. And the letterboard has the copy on it and there goes that. I think this is where an intern or a coordinator level employee is doing this all the time. So you're just giving them the task of go get a letterboard, go get Post-it notes, get a whiteboard, write on your bathroom mirror. Here's some whiteboard type markers or whatever it is. Go get chalk and write it on the ground. Like just everything you can think of, right? Go draw on the sand if you have to. And just take photos. And these are great because they need very little editing. Use a letterboard, come up with 3 to 5 headlines and go reset that letterboard over and over again. If you use a whiteboard, if you use Post-it notes, do the same thing. Hand those to a media buyer and get them built in the ad account and just launch them. They don't need to go through any edit process. You just need a 9x16 and a 1x1 and you just go, okay? This is a great episode for you to be thinking about working with my friends at More Staffing. More Staffing is a hiring firm in the Philippines that helps you attract, recruit, train, onboard incredible talent for your e-commerce business from the Philippines. They can do it across every part of your business. Operations, supply chain, marketing, and yes, design and editing, video editing. They have incredible solutions for you with awesome e-commerce employees, smart, talented professionals in the Philippines who are great English speakers, can work on your time schedule, and they will bring those folks on and give you a 1-year guarantee so that if that employee does not work out in your business, they will hire a replacement employee for free if that person doesn't make it a year. So they are a great company that I love working with. They've been my #1 sponsor for a while, and that's because they're a great partner to me. I'm working with them myself. I really love what More Staffing is doing. Add incredible talent to your e-commerce business from the Philippines at a much lower cost than it would be in the US, but a great salary in the Philippines. Everybody wins, and that is what you get with More Staffing. Go work with them now at morenow.co and tell them I sent you. Third, customer-generated content. Customer-generated content is going to be true UGC. That term used to mean something like what people mean now by sometimes called the term CGC, which is where real customers are giving you video reviews and giving you that content all the time. This can be set up through a post-purchase automation. Somebody just needs to review this. Again, this is a great job for an intern or a coordinator level position where somebody is reviewing the stuff as it comes in. But this is going to be set up through either a third-party app or a post-purchase flow of some kind. So I've seen some people do this with video apps, which is sort of like a back and forth, like almost like Snapchat or Marco Polo if you use one of those apps where there's a series of question and answers going back and forth. There's a few ways to do this, but this is a post-purchase automation that is running in the background and generating that content all the time. And the beauty of CGC is that you can't fake authenticity. It's very hard to fake true authenticity, okay? That authenticity from real customers often performs because customers can tell that is a real customer, that is not somebody who's an influencer paid to do this. And I have seen 5-minute long ads for Bamboo Earth, real customers just going through their skincare routine when I was with Bamboo Earth, just produce like millions of dollars. And this is like, exchange a gift card for the video, get rights and use of likeness in your process, get the video uploaded, have somebody review it, send it over to your designers, okay? Or send it over to your media buyer, have them go. Don't do any edits, maybe caption it, that's it, okay? Even that I would do like a sort of native non-captioned version. Okay, fourth, influencer and creator UGC. Those are two different things technically, but this is where my friends at Kinship are really onto something really good, okay? Kinship, they approach this idea of mass volume of content, which also builds your asset library, by the way. This is one of the beauties also of CGC, is that you get a bunch of stuff that you can use for other video content later. And Kinship's approach, right, is constantly seed your products to influencers, and specifically to influencers who have made their name or made their following, I should say, not based on some external thing, right? So athletes build their following based on being good athletes, but a sort of true creator type influencer is somebody who's built their social media following, not based on those other things, but just based on their ability to create content that's compelling. And so go find those people, work with them, seed your product. And as they post organically, when you gift product to them, you can then use that content, get permission, use that content in your ad account and just load it. Don't make any changes. Don't make any judgments. Just go. Just add it to your account and go. Now that's more involved. Kinship's going to cost you a little bit more money. And this is definitely my recommended partner for doing this. Kinship's going to cost you a little bit more money, but they're going to very quickly and smoothly develop a process for identifying great people to seed your product to. They're going to help you send all that product out. They're going to take that out of your hands so that you can mass create content that not only gets organic posts with the influencer, but then gets that content for your ad account. So now if you just think about those 4 buckets, right? design still images, real context still images, right? Ugly ad, post-it note type stuff. That's 2. 3, CGC. 4, true or influencer UGC, right? If you get those 4 buckets, now you've got a bunch of content that you can do at mass volume all the time. And especially if you pair those with some pre-approved 10 to 15 headlines, pieces of copy that media buyers can then go combine up whenever they want. Now you can get this flywheel churning all the time. Okay. And I think those 4 buckets right there get you really, really far in terms of the ability to get stuff into the ad account. And there's a 5th one that can go in there too, that is right in line with this as well. And that is, what about organic social media content that your team creates? Lots of the organic stuff from TikTok and from Reels and that sort of thing is not going to be so product focused as is needed for a lot of ads, okay? But some of it will be decently product focused. There is a difference between what will generate purchases versus what will generate organic hype. And you should, once again, if you're running your ad account on cost controls, you have very little reason not to just hammer stuff into your ad account whenever you can. Because if Facebook doesn't like it, it won't spend. And so there's no risk to doing that. So start grabbing all this stuff that your organic team is already creating and just add it to your ad account. Just go. Just add it into the mix, into your ad account, because who knows if it will perform or not. It might perform awesome. And if it does, then great. Then you've got some more stuff in the account and it might perform decently enough to, again, be that sort of defense quantity bucket. So if you have people who are creators running your organic social in any way, and they're attempting anything like any kind of virality, really, even if they aren't, they're generating that content in an ongoing way for your organic social accounts, then just throw that in the ad account as long as it's decently product focused and you don't use unlicensed music and see what happens. Now it's a 5th bucket that's in that quantity part. Okay, now let's talk about bucket number 6. Bucket number 6, I'm going to start moving towards the quality section. And everything I've said in those first 5 so far is mostly about the ability to move assets and track assets at some volume, okay? This is where Asana or ClickUp or whatever you're using, building a board with some automations that moves people through a process of creating and then notifying people about the content and just tagging them and saying, hey, more content came, here's where it is, go review it, go put it in the ad account, is the crucial thing. And it might mean that one of the key hires you make at some point in your creative department is actually an account manager, quality control, project manager type, more of that than a creative strategist. It's somebody who can sign off that, yes, this is decent, yes, this meets brand standards, and then can do the job of shepherding the content along the journey from creation all the way through ad build, and just can watch that all happen and just knows, yes, this stuff is getting into the ad account, it's getting created, you're good to go, etc. That is a project management job first and foremost, and sort of a quality review job. And then can also have an eye on that process to see where things are getting lost, to see where there's friction points being created, to see when CGC is not coming in as fast as you want, etc. Staying up on moving parts, giving people KPIs around how much stuff they can be creating all the time, etc. Now, here's the thing about all of those buckets too, by the way, is that you can do various ones of those with a light team. Maybe you don't have the money to pay Kinship right now to go do a seeding program, but you can, for very, very cheap, generate all of the other kind of assets I just referenced. It's not expensive. If you're in an earlier stage of your business, if you can just generate some kind of software-based process for that, some stuff's going to get lost. There's going to be some friction in some places because you can't dedicate that resource towards it the way you'd want to. But at the same time, you're going to move things along and generate stuff that's going to have a massive impact on your business. So putting some time and resource toward that in an earlier stage, towards one of the most important levers you can pull for growing your business profitably, is really, really, really worth doing. And I think is one of the best investments brands can make early on in their businesses they're growing. So beginning to generate all of those is helpful. Okay, let's talk about bucket number 6. This is also where now you start to add in sort of true creative strategy. Bucket number 6 is going to be what I'm going to call creative. Okay, this is a silly thing, but normally it's video focused. And what I mean is it's truly creative. It's somebody thinking about how do we come up with new concepts, shoot them, whether it's with a phone or higher quality production, whatever it is, shoot, and maybe it's ugly ads. It could really be any bucket, but you're trying to think about the real nuts and bolts of generating ads that sell product. This is where you're thinking about David Ogilvy and, Bill Bernbach and breakthrough advertising and sort of the other kinds of people, and thinking about how do I pair visuals with copy that are thinking harder about what the messaging is, thinking harder about how do I communicate this clearly, and really working hard at that particular advertising direct response task. This is moving towards that quality bucket, like I said. Let me give you an example. I have an ad for Curie, who you may have heard my interview with Sarah Moret, founder of Curie. I have an ad for Curie. By the way, that's a great interview. A lot of these thoughts today are coming out of that conversation. So go listen to that or go watch that. Sarah's brand grew 1,000% year over year. So it's like massive explosive growth. And for Curie, clean deodorant, one of the ads we have right now that's working pretty decently is an ad where Sarah, the founder, goes and gets strangers to sniff her armpits while she's hiking 9 miles in 90 degrees. Okay. So the whole idea here is people think clean deodorant won't work for them. And so this we thought was a creative and clever way to get people into the idea that clean deodorant can actually work. Okay. So that is not any particular format, really. It's not about format. It's about taking a message in an angle and trying to speak to a specific pain point a customer has. And that required planning for Sarah to shoot that content. She had to go chase that down while she was going hiking. Then we had to send it to a video editor who went through a process to go do that. We had to do edits on it. I mean, that's like a longer form of production. You just simply can't output this kind of thing as quickly as you can with all the first 5 buckets that I referenced there. Okay. But this is the beginning of the kind of thing that can really work. And there's, of course, all kinds of other concepts you could do like this. And we have a lot of ideas still for Curie. Okay. That kind of thing now requires probably an increased level of resource. This is where an agency partner or a freelancer, creative strategist type is coming into your business, and maybe in-house, coming to your business, and their job is to develop scripts with ideas and angles developed around maybe how you're thinking about your customer avatars and is thinking really carefully about them. Okay. So there's that. That person now probably also needs their own process, their own KPIs, their own timeline of output to keep working on those kinds of things. And again, that's going to be an operational problem in the sense that you need somebody assigned to do the work. You need video editors for that. And beginning to think about those things can really matter. Now, there's a couple ways to go about that. Like I said, sort of an agency partner type could be in there. This is certainly some of the things that AJF Growth provides for clients. We're not taking on more clients right now, but somebody like that could be really good. This could be contract script writers. You could think about it like that, like finding some folks who you just want them to develop more of these all the time. There may be a limitation to how much you can pay for these kinds of folks, but finding contract script writers could be a way to approach that. And then contract video editors, you could do this overseas if you wanted to do it for a little bit less money. I think this is where my friends at More Staffing, who I'm referencing in this episode, is a sponsor in this episode, would be a really good group to call because you can get marketing, digital design, and video editing help from somebody like that for a lot cheaper than doing that in the US. And building a process, again, somewhere in Asana or ClickUp, and really having your team and the key stakeholders in this process be absolutely dedicated to moving things through there. So at AJF Growth, we've built this. My Asana board for this has like 10 cards and it's got a bunch of automations built in, and we paid extra money to make sure we had a good version of Asana because, every step now, once you get 20, 30 pieces of creative moving through that process, it becomes a lot to manage. And somebody's job is there to provide edits, and you're in frame, and all of these things are built in order to move these larger things along. And so that process is really different than the back-end email process of getting CGC or somebody, shooting a Post-it note ad or something like that, right? They work really differently, and beginning to solve those in different ways with different key players is part of the challenge here. And what I want you mostly to hear is that that's the challenge you have to solve to make this happen. You have to solve this operational side of things to do it. And usually it's going to be some combination of people living and dying by the software, which is a struggle for a lot of brands, and having people with clear KPIs, clear roles and goals around outputting this kind of work with clear volume of output, all those things. Okay. So that's how you have to build that. Let's wrap this up. Number 7, I'm going to say long form explainer. This ad format works so constantly, and I think it's one of the biggest impact things you can do. Do not worry about the length. Just make sure people are getting all the information they need about your product. And this is where, again, script writer, not so much thinking about creative long form video, like really interesting new ideas like the, go have strangers sniff your armpits kind of thing that might be sort of eye-catching and compelling and interesting. But this is where you're just saying, here's exactly where this product meets you. I'm going to give you all the information and details, and it's going to be really information rich, and that's the goal. Okay. That long form explainer style I've seen take a long time to write, a long time to shoot, detailed script writing, and yet have massive impact on the business because you can output huge amounts you can give people a lot of information that really helps them. Okay. And then number 8, I'm going to call ongoing iterations. Ongoing iterations. And this is another process problem. Okay. So, you get script writers doing buckets 6 and 7 that I just talked about, again, whether it's an internal or an external resource. Number 8 is now another different person. And that is, as you start to get feedback on your ads, as you start to get data in your ad account, and the last bucket would be somebody whose job it is to make iterations of that content all the time in an ongoing way to where they see, again, this references my episode with Jess Bachman. If you like this content, you are going to like that episode a lot, where Jess talks about a process for analyzing things like hook rate and hold rate and click-through rate and conversion rate and all these elements of what's going on. This is another source of new ideas where somebody's analyzing the actual user engagement with your ads and then trying to create new versions of ads that go and generate iterations and edits and new styles based off the stuff that you've already built. And it creates new output, trying to sort of solve the shortcomings in the creative that's already ongoing. Use the data you're getting in the ad account to go do that. Go listen to that episode with Jess if you want more detail on that process, but that would be an 8th thing. Again, this now needs to be somebody's job to probably analyze that data and to output new creative ideas based on that data. Again, hard work requires somebody living in the ad account, requires somebody being able to brief from the ad account. That probably needs to be the same person. They need to be able to read the data and then brief ideas off the data, etc. Okay, so it's really hard, but there you go. There's 8 different buckets of content. Here is the big takeaway from this episode. Pick some of those, start putting resources toward developing process on those. Don't try and do them all at once. And as you do that, build process for each step. Again, this is a matter of Asana boards, ClickUp boards, whatever. Or I've never used ClickUp, so I don't know if they have boards. If you're living in a software stack that helps you organize this kind of content, having people assigned to the work, and as you scale, adding layers to each of those things. If you have extra money, this is where I would put it. And until you've got an ongoing content machine covering as many of those 8 buckets, and there's probably more I'm not thinking about, as you can, and building that out. If you can do that effectively, you're going to set yourself up for both quantity and quality, for offense and defense, and for an ad account that scales consistently even when things get really, really hard, and even when your best creative stops performing over more time. That's the way to build it. And it's mostly about the ability to lock in on the operational execution of that process and then generate creative from there. All right. That was a mouthful today. It's actually a lot longer of an episode than I expected it to be, because once I started talking, I realized the same thing I realized when I do this with clients, which is that this stuff is complex and difficult and requires a whole bunch of work and effort. So hopefully that's helpful to you. And if you want help building this out, you should go work with my sponsor, More Staffing. You can go visit them at morenow.co. They have incredible resources in the Philippines to help you with this and every other part of the business that you need help with. So go work with More Staffing, as you heard me reference earlier. If you're building out team and process around this sort of thing, they can give you incredible talent to do it. Next week on the show, I have an incredible episode with Dan McCormick, not only the founder of Create, the creatine gummy company that is a really fascinating thing Dan's been building in public in a big way. So I said, let's do it on our podcast. Let's talk through what's going on in your business. You're going to love that episode, love that interview a lot. Lots of stuff there around how to really launch a brand and how to grow it from the earliest stages, thinking carefully about things like LTV and unit economics and all those things. Dan is also the co-author with his brother Packy of the Not Boring newsletter, which is really fantastic. And you should be going and check that out as well. So you're going to want to hear my episode with Dan. Make sure to smash that subscribe button wherever you're listening or watching the Andrew Ferris podcast. Is that what my show's called? The Andrew Ferris podcast. That's right. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Andrew J. Ferris. Reach out to me at podcast@ajfgrowth.com if you've got questions for me. I would love to hear them, would love to interact with you. And you can go see everything I'm doing at ajfgrowth.com, as well as get a bunch of free resources from me by signing up for my email list there. I'm not sending out a regular newsletter or anything like that, but hey, maybe one day I will. So go sign up for my newsletter, get some free resources. That's all at ajfgrowth.com. And I would, of course, love it if you would share this episode with somebody if it would be helpful to them. That's the number one way you can say thanks if you've appreciated my content. Thanks so much for watching, for listening, and I will see you next time.